Это работал какой-то разум, возможно, космический разум. Может быть, это наши предки здесь действовали очень давно, потому что на глубине 70 метров примерно 800 миллионов лет или 600 миллионов лет, как ученые считают некоторые.
Some called her the real Sleeping Beauty. Others say this was just another fabricated tale told by imaginative men. But beneath the cloak of skepticism, the legend of the 800-million-year-old Tisul Princess found in Siberia is a rabbit hole that'll have you wearing a tin-foil hat. Whether you believe in conspiracies or not, this tale of a perfectly preserved mummy will test the limits of your imagination and possibly disrupt everything we thought we knew about human history and evolution. Who is the Tisul Princess? How did she get buried in a coal mine? And how did her body remain incorruptible for so long? Get ready for a story unlike anything you've ever seen as we unveil the mystery of the Tisul Princess. Chapter 1. Find of the Century. Far away in the endless snowy lands of Siberia lies the village of Rzhavchik, hidden deep in the Tisul district of the Kemerovo region, which was then a part of the Soviet territory. The date was September 5, 1969, a day that would remain etched in the memories of a group of miners working in the harsh and unpredictable region. While scouring the depths of the earth in search of hidden treasures and natural resources by which to sustain their livelihood, these brave men stumbled across something so intriguing, so mysterious, that it had gradually transformed into a legendary tale. As the story goes, the miners were about 229 feet underground when one of them suddenly struck something strange with his trusty pickaxe. Driven by curiosity with a dash of excitement, this lucky miner alerted the rest of the crew to the strange structure lurking beneath the depths. After a little more digging, they finally came upon what appeared to be a marble sarcophagus, clinging to the age-old depths of the earth. Many questions ran through their minds at that very moment. What was locked away in this mysterious coffin, and how was it buried so deep underground? By standard procedure, a message was sent to their leader, Alexander Masalagin, an experienced and respected head of the Ores, who was noticeably baffled about the kind of finding his men had indicated in their message. But without wasting time, Masalagin quickly sped to the mining site and ordered that the sarcophagus be brought to the surface. How they were able to transport such a massive coffin without the use of heavy machinery remains a mystery. However, once it was out, it became obvious that there was more to this coffin than meets the eye. Initially, they believed that sarcophagus held immense treasure that would set each of them for life, possibly the hidden loot of a wealthy man from ages past. But curious as the men were, none of them was willing to open up the coffin and check out what was inside. Stunned by the mysterious artifact himself, Masalagin sent a report to the proper authorities, so experts capable of handling such delicate findings could be sent in. However, rumors and grumblings began circulating among the miners, as many of those anticipating treasure believed the loot would simply be snatched from their hands without any compensation. They knew that once the government got involved, everything would become shady and they'd be left empty-handed. But this didn't change Masalagin's decision. He knew he couldn't succumb to the voices of his men and keep the finding a secret. Someone higher up had to know about this discovery that could possibly change history. He was right and wrong at the same time, but that'll become clearer the deeper we go. The miners themselves were unrelenting, determined to keep whatever was in the sarcophagus to themselves. After a brief deliberation among themselves, a decision was made to open the marble artifact. But that also wouldn't come easy. While it appeared to be sparsely sealed on the outside, breaking it open took hours of sweat, before finally, the adhesive that held the lid to the body began to melt away by itself. It was the blaze of the sun striking the gelatinous bond that made it give way, as the men stared with their jaws on the floor. But as they opened the coffin and peered inside, nothing could have prepared them for the alluring sight that awaited them. Instead of precious gold objects and rare stones, they found a young woman lying right there in a sleeping position, with skin as soft as silk and a beauty that could have only been crafted by nature itself. Although she was obviously dead, her deep blue eyes were filled with a semblance of life even the miners lacked, and her soft, dark brown hair fell off her shoulder like a waterfall, reaching her waist. As the men looked on in awe and amazement, they noticed she was dressed in a strange white lace dress, embroidered with flowers, giving her a sense of timeless elegance. However, the strange thing about this outfit was its transparent nature, which couldn't have been replicated by any fabric known to man at the time. Surrounding this woman was a pink liquid, which didn't look like anything the miners were familiar with, and by the side of her head, they found a small black metal box hidden away in the liquid. At the time, none of the men could identify what this black metal box was, but modern historians have documented how it bears a striking resemblance to a smartphone, which was very strange since the first smartphone wasn't invented until 1992, 23 years after this sarcophagus was discovered. As the rest of the miners grappled with shock, one curious young man decided to throw caution to the wind, dipped his finger into the pink liquid and tasted it. Unlike what the people present expected though, the man displayed no instant reaction. But things took a more disturbing turn the following week, when he suddenly lost his mind, began acting erratically, and was declared a lunatic by the community. His mental state got so bad that he couldn't figure out the direction to his home, and began sleeping outside in the harsh Siberian winter until he froze to death just outside his own house one night. About the woman in the sarcophagus though, she quickly became known as the Tisul Princess, shortly after the discovery was made, although no one was able to figure out where exactly she had come from, who she was, or why she was buried in that spot. But since Masaligan had sent a message to the Soviet authorities before his men opened the coffin, it didn't take long for them to arrive and shut down the place, sending everyone into a massive frenzy. According to eyewitness accounts, members of the KGB, the main security force of the Soviet authorities, suddenly arrived on the scene, dressed in protective suits and yelling to the onlookers, "Contagious," before taking the names of everyone present, surrounding the open sarcophagus, and barring direct access to the coffin. The crowd could only observe from afar as the KGB agents also stared at the perfectly preserved body with wonder in their eyes. These men knew that before they could deeply study the Tisul Princess, they had to first move her away from the remote region to a lab where expert archaeologists could conduct necessary analysis. But that also turned out to be a Herculean task. Their first instinct was to airlift both the coffin and its contents with a helicopter, but after attaching it, they discovered it was too heavy to be transported this way. So, to lighten the load, they decided to drain the liquid, pour it into a separate vessel, and transport it separately. But as soon as the pink substance was removed from the sarcophagus, the skin of the mysterious young woman began to darken, much to the shock of the agents themselves. What initially looked like a sleeping lady instantly became a shriveled skeletal remains, which looked like it had been dead and buried thousands of years ago. Curiously, the agents immediately returned the liquid into the coffin, and the body also became restored to its former pristine state. At this point, many of them began to postulate that the liquid must have been responsible for the perfect preservation of the deceased Tisul Princess, and a decision was made to never separate them. After much deliberation among themselves, the government agents finally found a way to transport both the body and the coffin to the city of Novosibirsk, where it was handed to an unnamed science professor. But as the scientists began working on the body and coffin, what he discovered shocked everyone. Chapter 2. The mystery unravels. When scientists get handed mummified remains, one of their first tasks is to determine its age, so as to understand where it fits in the evolutionary timeline. But unlike other finds that can be easily analyzed through radiocarbon dating, this particular find seemed to defy the scientific process, so the researcher in charge had to resort to other less used methods to uncover how old this mummified remains really was. A few days later, the professor finally struck the answers he'd been searching for, and so he took a journey back to the village of Rzhavchik to deliver his findings first to the people, whose curiosity had been piqued ever since the sarcophagus was removed. He boldly asserted that the woman had actually been buried 800 million years ago, during the Carboniferous period, a statement that both shocked and confused the people. How could a woman have lived in such a remote region at a period when even dinosaurs had not evolved? No one could provide an answer back then, and even today, it continues to baffle historians and seasoned scientists alike. The only probable explanation at first was that this must be an extraterrestrial being from an unknown planet, where beings that bear striking semblance to humans exist. Judging by her intensely white skin tone, many began to speculate that her home planet must have received less sunlight than Earth. But questions still lingered as to how she made it to our planet. However, the extraterrestrial theory was soon put to rest after the professor also mentioned that the Tisul Princess was 100% human, according to genetic analysis, and was even ethnically Russian. The fabric of her dress was also supposedly crafted from an unknown material, differing greatly from anything the man or anyone had ever seen. And as for the pink liquid, the composition remained unidentified. While it was determined to be an embalming chemical used in preserving the deceased remains of the princess, it wasn't like anything the professor was familiar with, and no one could also explain why an embalming chemical caused a person to lose their mind just by tasting. If indeed this was true, it could change the established history of human existence forever, shattering all our previous beliefs about when and how humans started living on this plane, the emergence of advanced civilizations, and the general history of our planet as a whole. The professor's findings became quite polarizing, dividing the audience into believers who strongly agreed with his findings, and skeptics who argued that his conclusions were erroneous. Picking a side was then a question of who to believe. The following day, the local newspaper ran a feature on the Tisul Princess, documenting the story of how it was discovered. as well as the eye-opening findings that were presented by the scientist, both as a means of spreading the word and for historical preservation. However, the whole story took an even more disturbing turn after the KGB agents who carted away the sarcophagus returned to the village, searching the buildings and homes of the villagers, and confiscating every publication containing the article. To further erase any traces of this discovery, the government agents issued a serious warning to anyone who had plans to keep propagating the story, threatening further consequences. While both the professor from Novosibirsk and the newspaper editor were punished for their attempt to expose the truth about the princess. In another shocking turn of events, all of the witnesses would eventually lose their lives in the most mysterious ways possible, from the men who dug out the coffin to the spectators who gathered to witness its unveiling. One of such men was said to have driven off into the waters shortly after the discovery, and although official reports claimed the accident was due to his drunk driving, those who knew him personally vouched that he had never touched a drop of alcohol all his life. So how could he have suddenly picked up such a habit out of nowhere? As the other men also began to die, the mystery deepened even further. Were they being killed off by the government in order to hide this secret? Was the fumes from the pink liquid responsible for their deaths? Or were these deaths simply coincidental and had nothing to do with the government or the mummified remains? If the government was really involved, why were they allegedly killing off the only set of people who had first-hand experience about such a huge discovery that could change our understanding of life forever? There are simply too many things that don't add up about this story, but the rabbit hole goes even further. Soviet military forces were also sent to cordon off Rozhovchik, preventing any outsider from coming in to investigate the discovery. And the site itself was supposedly buried under the earth, so no one could ever access it, even if they tried. But the more the government tried to keep the stories quiet, the more conspiracy theories began to emerge, claiming that the mummified remains was either from an ancient extinct species of humans who walked the earth before the microbes even arose from the deep sea, or like others had mentioned, an extraterrestrial being with origins out of this world. The story would eventually begin to die down after a while. And since the government successfully barred entry into the region, very few people in the outside world knew of the existence of this magical princess from 800 million years ago. However, that was just about to change. Chapter 3. The Search for Deeper Secrets. Locked away from the rest of the world, and securely guarded by Soviet forces, the village of Rozhovchik remained under military occupation for many years, due to the enchanting secrets it held. But 4 years later, archaeologists launched another investigation in the regions along the shores and islands of Lake Berchikul, not far from the site of the first discovery. The goal was to uncover more artifacts that could be linked to the Tisul Princess, or perhaps another mummy of the same origin. While the locals weren't allowed to witness this scientific process, it was one of the soldiers who would eventually kickstart their curiosity. One fateful night, a few of the military personnel decided to visit the local pub, and after a few drinks, one of them revealed a very significant detail no one had heard before. 3 more sarcophagi had actually been found in the successive excavations, all bearing semblance to the Tisul Princess, both in structure and the nature of the preserved remains. Apparently, these new coffins contained male remains, both showing no signs of decomposition, and also submerged in the mysterious pink liquid. Just like that, the interest of the villagers was reignited, and conversations about the Tisul Princess and the other similar sarcophagi erupted everywhere the people were gathered. Over the years, the journalist who initially wrote the article reappeared with stories of how his life took a dramatic turn following the publication. According to his accounts, he was immediately picked up by the KGB and put through intense persecution and near-death experiences, ultimately leading him to shut down his journalism career. The sensationalized news would also eventually find its way onto one of the central television channels in the Soviet Union, which ran a story on both the Tisul Princess's sarcophagi, as well the 2 others that were later discovered at Berchikul. However, the age of these finds were dramatically reduced from 800 million to 200 million years, which didn't essentially make it more believable. But this was the only part of the story that got changed, and the TV station managed to keep the other details intact to maintain credibility. As expected, the story has also faced scrutiny for many years, since it sounds more fictional than true. Historians have also been working long and hard to uncover the truth behind this story, but no one has been able to either prove or disprove its validity. To understand whether this mythical tale holds any water, we peel back the pages of history and explore the telltale signs that could point us in the right direction in the search for the elusive truth. Chapter 4. Fact or Fiction. For many years, The tale of the Tisul Princess allegedly remained suppressed by the government, but that was until a man named Oleg Kulishkin decided to publish the story in the old newspaper Arkaim, a story which he claimed he heard from a random traveler while on a trip to Moscow. On this infamous trip, Kulishkin found himself sitting beside a former KGB colonel, who was one of the agents assigned to oversee the case. At first, the man sat silently on the train, with a stern and unusually intelligent face. But the journey was long, and soon he began seeking a conversation to kill time and make the destination arrive faster. Kulishkin was also wary of the travels in his own mind, so he humored the old man, and a life-changing chit-chat ensued. The unidentified man revealed that he was one of the top officers of a secret USSR force, who saw things no eyes should, and heard whispers that were forbidden for outsiders. He had left the force in 1991, bearing secrets he swore to carry to his grave, but was compelled to share with this kind stranger sitting with him. He narrated the details of the events that took place that fateful day in 1960-1969, and how the overall head of the coal mining site, Alexander Alexandrovich Masaligin, instantly called for all mining activities to be halted once the discovery was made. He also spoke of how the mysterious young woman was found with her open blue eyes, staring into the sky. However, in his own version, he made no mention of the body regaining its beauty, or the water being returned into the sarcophagus after it was drained, but confirmed all the other aspects of the story, including the tales of the man who ran mad after tasting the substance. In addition to these fascinating claims, he also mentioned how the villagers attempted to fight against being silenced by the government, with one of them even writing a letter to the Central Committee of the CPSU, calling for an end to the military occupation forced upon them because of the 800-million-year-old sarcophagus in Siberia, Tisul Princess. Sadly, this truth fighter died 1 year later under mysterious circumstances, along with everyone like him who wanted their voices heard and their stories told. The surviving witnesses who didn't want to lose their lives took this as a cue and remained silent forever, their narratives locked away in the deepest depths of their hearts. Investigations also revealed several discrepancies in the stories, especially as told by some of the witnesses. For example, Tatiana Pavlovna Karnaukov, the wife of the miner Alexander Ivanovich Karnaukov himself, claimed that her husband actually worked in a quarry located in that same village, but that he actually died as a result of prolonged serious illness, and not under mysterious circumstances. Then there's the testimony of Galina Rebrikova, the director of the village school, who confirmed that Alexander Masaligin, who headed the team at the site, really worked in the quarry, but died in 1983 or 1984. The legend claims he died in 1980, and also under strange circumstances, but it turns out he actually battled and lost to leukemia. While it would have been helpful to actually explore the depths of the mines, unfortunately, it has gradually transformed into an ordinary forest following its closure in 1973. The journalist investigating this mysterious event also managed to meet a man named Nikola Mikhailovich Garmanov, the last of those who found the sarcophagus. It was through the interview with Garmanov that the roles of each of the men were revealed. Garmanov himself working as a bulldozer driver, Karnaukov as a blacksmith. However, contrary to his wife's narrative, Garmanov revealed that Karnaukov didn't die from a prolonged illness. Instead, he was hit by a truck one day in 1980 while riding his motorcycle. He would spend the next 2 days fighting for his life in the hospital before being pronounced dead. At the same time, Garmanov also claimed that throughout his 33 years of working as a bulldozer driver, he never found any sarcophagi or strange artifacts like the stories claim. So, if the only possible witness to the events professed that there was no discovery, where did the stories come from then? On the other end, why are the testimonies of Karnaukova and Garmanov so different, even though they worked in the same place at the same time? Also, for almost all the witnesses, their stories only recorded half the legend, with only one common theme repeated like a mantra: there was no such thing. It is also worth noting that there are no actual pictures of this princess, nor the sarcophagi, and most renditions found online and used by historians are actually artistic representations, which might differ widely, and may or may not be an accurate representation of the true Tisul Princess. Before we unveil more shocking revelations about this mythical being, here's our subscriber's pick for today. Imagine being down there with the 6 miners on that cold winter day, stumbling across something so magical that you cannot even believe your eyes. As crazy as this story may sound, this may or may not have been the reality of those lucky, or rather unlucky men, who found this gem hidden deep beneath the Earth's surface. But before they could even celebrate this once-in-a-lifetime find, it was snatched away by the government. never to be seen or heard from again, except in stories and legendary tales that rival the plot of whimsical Disney adventures. One can only wonder what the Soviet authorities did with the 800-million-year-old sarcophagus in Siberia, Tisul Princess, and thanks to the oppressive regime, no one will ever know. Now it's time for you to join the conversation by sharing your thoughts about this incredible find in the comment section down below. Do you think this story really happened, and there's an actual 800-million-year-old mummy hidden somewhere? Or is this just another fictional story that has slowly crept into the history books? We'd love to hear from you. But now, let's get back to even more disturbing details. Chapter 5. Further down the rabbit hole. In March 2012, 10 years after the Tisul Princess story re-emerged, the man who published the Soviet colonel's story came out with even more shocking revelations about this enchanting story, including a tale of personal tragedy. Kulishkin claimed on the day after the publication went live, he was tragically hit by a car, coming out on the other side with his life and slight injuries. Even though he joked that this may be a coincidence, something about the chilling encounter with death made his heart shudder, and somewhere in the corner of his mind, he nurtured the idea that this might all be interconnected. He also mentioned how he got a call from a department of the Russian government known as the Federal Office of Good Advice, informing him that he had accidentally released a terrible state secret that had been kept for decades. Although he made no mention of the consequences that befell him for such reckless actions, since he was still alive and not behind bars, it could only mean he probably received a pardon. Kulishkin would later release another message, where he revealed that the Russian authorities had erected a massive garbage dump at the site where the coffin was discovered in the village of Rozhavchik. What was once a mining site had systematically now received almost all the garbage from the entire region, which many would argue sounds like a cover-up. Apart from Kulishkin's testimony, the story was also confirmed by a retired FSB Major General Valery Malovany, FSB being successor of the KGB. There are also stories of unidentified flying objects spotted in the same region following the unearthing of the Tisul Princess sarcophagi, although no form of evidence was presented to support these claims. At the end of the day, the truth remains that a lot of people consider the Tisul Princess story a work of fiction that became so ingrained in history that people began to consider it as an actual historical event. Some say it was inspired by an ancient poem, others say it was cooked up by the miner's overactive imagination. And then there are those who believe these theories were invented by the government to hide the secrets forever. In spite of the obvious skepticism that surrounds this epic tale, it isn't the first time strange finds would be uncovered in a coal mine. A good example was on June 9, 1891, when a woman named Mrs. S. Culp was gathering coal for a stove in Morrisonville, Illinois, and suddenly noticed that one of the coals had a peculiar shape and feel to it. She decided to break it out of curiosity, and to her surprise, there was a perfectly sculpted gold chain hidden inside. The chain's imprint had been impressed in the carbon, which meant that it was there at the time of its formation. The shocking part was that this coal was dated to be at least 260 million years old, which begs the question, how did a gold chain find its way into a block or coal that long ago without human interference? That's not the craziest story, though. In the same 19th century, coal miners also stumbled across a modern human skeleton buried some 98 feet below in an Illinois coal mine. Again, the coal seam found within these depths was dated to be about 300 to 320 million years old, which poses a whole lot of new questions. With these stories confirmed to actually be real with verifiable sources, it makes us wonder what mystery about our world we have not unraveled yet. Are we really the first human civilization? Or was there one before us that died out? Did we really emerge 315 years ago? Or we came earlier than the dinosaurs some 100 million years ago? Or are these stories merely fabricated to keep us curious forever? We'll leave that for you to decide. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.